I used to believe the disappearance of the 4 Miller cousins in Wildwood was just a tragic accident, a cruel twist of fate. But when I uncovered the cult leader, the town's very own mayor was the sole survivor of that 1996 vanishing, the nightmare went far deeper. A dark secret buried for decades, where blood and power collide to protect brutal rituals. If you think this is just an ordinary family story, you're wrong. Subscribe now to catch our most shocking and gripping stories yet. The snow had begun falling in thick, slow spirals before noon. A hush settling over the old pines of Wildwood that made the world feel endless and soft at the edges, like a dream. At the edge of the woods, 4 children raced one another down the brittle path behind their grandmother's house, boots, crunching, mittens flashing. This was Miller tradition, the first snow of December. Casey, the oldest, at 11, leading the charge, his jacket too small and cheeks raw from the cold. Beside him, Anna, only a year younger, but always a step ahead when it came to daring the others. Behind them, little Elise, 7, whose laughter was already breathless from trying to keep up. And baby Sam, just turned 5, bundled so tightly in her pink scarf, she looked more like a doll than a child. It was the first day of winter break, and the 4 had begged all morning for permission to play in the woods. Their parents gathered in the kitchen with mugs of coffee, and nervous glances at the sky finally relented when the flakes grew fat and slow. The air tinged blue and silent. Stay close to the house, their mother called, but she already knew that was a losing battle. Casey's red hat disappeared over the first ridge, Anna right on his heels, and the little ones tumbling after. There was a kind of wildness to Wildwood. Even in daylight, a sense that the forest was older than the farms and fences that bordered it, that it kept its own secrets in the dark soil and the way the wind twisted through the branches. The Miller children didn't think about that. Not then. They thought only of how the snow muffled the world, how their boots left crisp trails behind them, how the old birch tree near the creek made the perfect base for their snow fort. The afternoon unspooled in snapshots of childhood. Casey climbing halfway up a leaning pine to look for fox tracks, hollering down to Anna that he could see the river from up here. The sky opening just long enough to show a slice of distant sun. Elise chasing Sam around a stump, both of them shrieking as the snowball Anna had packed sailed wide and thudded harmlessly into a clump of ferns. It was cold, yes, but the kind of cold that brings color to cheeks, not the kind that bites. Even when the wind picked up and the clouds thickened, the children's laughter seemed to knit together, the grayness turning the world small and safe. At home, their grandmother watched from the kitchen window, tracing their shapes with one finger against the glass. Like little ghosts, she murmured, though her tone was fond. They found the clearing by accident. It lay deeper in the woods than they usually wandered, a bowl-shaped hollow ringed with old stones half covered by snow and thick moss. Casey swore he'd been there before, but Anna said she'd have remembered the way the stones were set like the numbers on a clock. Elise was the one who saw the silver glint poking out from the base of one stone, her mitten brushing away snow to reveal a delicate chain. "Look," she cried, holding up the pendant, a silver locket in the shape of an eye, strange and old, the metal cold against her palm. They circled the stones, curious voices bouncing and echoing. Anna dared Casey to open the locket, but when he tried, the clasp stuck. Sam was tracing spirals in the frost with her mitten, copying the faint carvings she'd found on the stone's face. Elise was crouched low, peering at something dark. Dark and sticky, half buried in the snow. "Like candle wax," she said, wrinkling her nose. It was the sudden silence that startled them. One moment Anna was teasing Casey, and the next the wind cut off the trees, closing in everything still. Elise stood up fast, eyes wide. Sam dropped the locket, and it landed on the snow with a muffled thud. "Do you hear that?" Anna asked, but there was nothing. No wind, no birds, just the slow thump of her own heart. Casey tried to laugh it off. "It's just the woods being spooky." But the air felt different, heavy charged, like before a storm. He bent to pick up the locket, fingers stiff with cold, but the metal burned against his skin, bright and wrong. He dropped it again, cursing softly. It happened quickly then. A shadow flickered at the edge of the clearing, so fast Casey wasn't sure he saw anything at all. Anna gasped, stepping toward the trees. "Who's there?" The words thin and sharp. Elise grabbed Sam's hand, both of them suddenly desperate to leave. The wind rose sharp and keening, pulling at their coats. Snow fell harder, blurring the world. Casey called for Anna, but his voice came back to him, twisted smaller. Sam started to cry, high and frightened. Elise tugged at her arm. "We should go, Anna, please." But the world was folding in on itself. The trees seemed to crowd closer. The snow flattening sound, swallowing up voices and footsteps. Casey reached for Anna's shoulder, but his glove caught only empty air. Anna was gone. Sam stumbled, slipping on the wet ground. Elise turned, searching for Casey. He was gone too. Panic, quick and white-hot, surged in Elise's chest. She screamed, but the sound barely carried. The woods were too thick, the snow too deep. Sam sobbed, clutching Elise's sleeve. "Where's Casey? Where's Anna?" No answer. Only the rising wail of the wind. Back at the house, the first hint that something was wrong came with the darkness. Their grandmother watched the clock. Then the window, waiting for 4 shapes to reappear at the tree line. She called once, twice. When no one answered, she bundled herself in a heavy coat and went out with a flashlight, boots crunching over fresh snow, voice breaking as she called their names. Within an hour, the search was on. Their father's truck headlights swept the woods, voices shouting, dogs barking. Neighbors arrived with lanterns and makeshift torches, the light flickering off trunks and branches. Footprints led deep into the pines, then vanished beneath drifting snow. Someone found the clearing, the ring of stones, half hidden. It was there that they found the locket lying open on the snow. Empty now, its chain curled like a question mark. There too they found the melted wax pooled at the base of the largest stone, blackened and strange, and faint marks carved in spirals across the surface. The rest was silence and sorrow. The searchers called and called, but the forest gave nothing back. The only sounds were the wind and the far-off keening of a mother's grief echoing beneath the trees. By midnight, the woods were crawling with people. Sheriffs, volunteers, search dogs, everyone moving as if time might undo itself if they just kept looking. Lights bobbed in the darkness, but the children were gone, as if swallowed by the earth. At dawn, all that remained were footprints drifting into nothing. The locket on the snow and the cold certainty that something in Wildwood had changed forever. The story of the Miller children would become a ghost story. A warning whispered by parents to restless kids on snowy nights: don't go into Wildwood when the snow falls. Stay close to home. Remember what was lost. But for that one long night, as snow fell and the wind howled and the woods kept their secrets, it was simply this: 4 children lost, a family shattered, and a silver locket gleaming in the dawn light. A promise that some mysteries would never be solved. 25 years later, the snow in Wildwood fell the same way it always had. Thick, silent, consuming. But for Emma Grant, the silence was heavier than ever. She watched it from behind the kitchen window of her mother's house, the same old house where the laughter of her cousins once rang out. The house felt smaller now, the rooms emptied of all but memory. The Miller children's photos still hung in the hallway, frozen in time, all bright eyes and hope, each frame like a wound that never healed. Emma stood there, fingertips pressed against the frost-bitten glass, coffee cooling in her hand. She had been back in Split Pines, this withering little Ontario town, for 3 months longer than she'd planned, longer than she wanted. Every time she tried to leave, her dreams dragged her back, Anna's blue scarf trailing in the wind, Casey's crooked grin, Elise's tiny hand clutching hers in fear. She'd wake with a gasp, fingers clawing the sheets, heart pounding as if the woods themselves had reached through her window. In Toronto, she could push the memories down with deadlines, noise, late-night city light. Here the silence was suffocating. The townsfolk still called her. The Grant girls still whispered behind their hands at the grocery store or the church steps. She could see it in the way they averted their eyes, the hush that settled when she walked into the post office. Wildwood was a name barely spoken, as if the mere sound might summon some ancient evil. Even the kids who'd grown up after the tragedy never played in the forest, no matter how tempting the first snow was. The forest took, and the town learned to stop asking why. Emma's mother, Ruth, had grown thinner over the years, her hair gone silver. She moved through the house with a kind of careful quiet, as if sound itself might shatter the fragile calm they'd built out of loss. That morning, Ruth was in the back bedroom, folding sheets. Emma found herself staring at her mother's hands, thin, strong, the knuckles marked by time. The hands that once braided Emma's hair, that had held her when the world fell apart. "Emma," Ruth said softly, as if summoned by thought, "you don't have to stay here. You should go back to your life. There's nothing left to find in Wildwood." Emma shook her head, swallowing the words she wanted to say. Instead, she said, "I just need a little more time, Mom." She meant it. She needed something answers closure, a reason for the ache in her chest that never went away. That afternoon, a storm rolled in, wind whipping through the old siding, rattling the window panes. Emma retreated to the attic, a space she'd avoided since childhood. The air was thick with dust, the smell of mothballs and old paper. Boxes were stacked to the rafters, her grandfather's war medals, Christmas ornaments, bundles of yellowed letters. It was there in a trunk beneath a heap of faded quilts that Emma found the box. The box was smaller than she remembered, its wood scarred and dark, a brass latch flecked with rust. Inside, carefully wrapped in a blue scarf, was her Aunt Lily's journal. Lily had been the family's only cop, the one who'd refused to believe in fairy tales or curses, the one who'd searched every inch of Wildwood for the missing children until her nerves snapped and her marriage fell apart. She died 5 years later of what the doctors called natural causes. No one really talked about Lily. In this house, pain was something you packed in a box and shoved into the dark. Emma's hands shook as she opened the journal pages, curled and ink faded. The first entry was dated December 18th, 1996. They're gone. 4 children. No footprints past the clearing. It's like they were plucked from the earth. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She turned the pages, reading Lily's scrawl, frantic, methodical, desperate. Maps of the woods, names of search party members, strange symbols scribbled in the margins. Notes about townspeople she'd interviewed. Odd things she'd seen in the woods, wax melted on stones, feathers tied to branches, an old man in a black coat who disappeared when she called out. There were newspaper clippings glued to the pages, 4 children missing, in Wildwood search, suspended, no new leads. Halfway through the journal, the writing changed, grew sharper, angrier. "They don't want me looking anymore. Sheriff Cooper says I'm scaring the town. Maybe that's the point. Maybe they should be scared." A slip of paper fell from between the pages. On it, a single sentence. "Don't trust anyone. Not even me." Emma sat back on her heels, heart thudding. She had never known this version of Lily, the haunted, furious woman who had kept looking when everyone else gave up. In the box, she found more, a plastic bag containing a silver locket, cold and dull. A folder of police reports, most pages stamped "Confidential." A photograph of the old clearing stones ringed with snow, something dark pooled at their base. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Her mother had turned on the radio, old country music drifting up through the floorboards. Emma pressed her palm to the journal, feeling the weight of it. She thought about the silence that hung over Split Pines, the way nobody ever spoke about the Millers, the children, the woods. The way people changed the subject, turned their backs, locked their doors. But someone had to speak. Someone had to break the spell. Emma snapped the journal shut and took it to her old bedroom. She spread the contents out across her bed, pages of grief maps of the woods, a timeline of sorrow. She wrote names on a notepad: Casey, Anna, Elise, Sam. Her cousins. 4 names carved into her heart. 4 ghosts who had shaped every day of her life since. That night, Emma and Ruth sat together at the kitchen table, 2 women connected by grief, separated by time. Ruth poured tea, her hands trembling only slightly. Emma watched the steam curl from her cup, tried to find the words. "Mom, did Aunt Lily ever talk to you about what she found?" Emma asked. Ruth's eyes clouded. She was obsessed. She wouldn't let it go, not even after the sheriff told her to stop. Said there were things in those woods that no one wanted to understand. "Do you?" Emma pressed. "Do you believe there's more to it?" Her mother flinched, just barely. "I believe the woods take what they want. I believe some things are better left alone." Emma shook her head, feeling a flare of anger. If everyone believed that nothing would ever change, they'd still be out there, Casey, Anna, Elise, Sam. They'd have grown up, maybe gotten married, had kids. Instead, all we have is this. She gestured at the journal, the photos, the endless empty rooms. Ruth stared into her tea. You think you're the only one who wants answers? I lost my sister Emma. I lost my nieces. I lost you too for a while. You're here now, but I see you drifting away again. Don't go back into those woods. Please. Emma stood, unable to sit still any longer. She paced to the window, watched the snow swirl beneath the streetlights. In that moment, she felt the weight of all the years, the fear, the secrecy, the collective cowardice that let the town move on without ever healing. She turned, voice low and sure. I can't live in a world where the woods always win. Her mother looked up, eyes shining with tears she wouldn't let fall. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise, Emma said, but the words tasted like a lie. The next morning, Emma dressed before dawn. She tucked Lily's journal and the locket into her backpack, zipped her jacket tight. The air outside was sharp, the sky bruised with storm clouds. She walked through town with her head high, feeling the stares, some pitying, some fearful, some angry. At the coffee shop, the old men playing cards fell silent as she passed. Mrs. Calhoun, who'd lived next door forever, avoided her eyes. The grocer, Mr. Finch rang up her items without a word, fingers shaking. Outside the hardware store, someone had written Wildwood on the brick in red spray paint. Underneath, someone else had tried to scrub it away. Emma felt it all pressing in the history, the silence, the refusal to look back. She knew that if she didn't break the spell, no one ever would. That night, sitting cross-legged on her childhood bed, Emma mapped out her plan. She'd start with the old police reports, cross-reference the search maps with Lily's notes. She'd talk to the people who remembered, if anyone would speak to her. She'd go back to the clearing. And she'd do it for her cousins, for Lily, for her mother, for every family in Split Pines who lived with a hole in their heart. The snow kept falling. The woods waited. Emma's eyes in the mirror were fierce, unafraid, determined to drag the truth into the light, even if it meant tearing open every old wound the town had spent decades trying to forget. She was done being haunted. This time the woods would answer to her. Cody Walker had always known how to say no to Emma Grant. Or at least that's what he told himself even after all these years. But when she showed up at his workshop on the edge of Split Pines, snow melting in her hair, her eyes bright and unslept, Cody realized again he never really had a choice with Emma. Not when it came to Wildwood. Not when it came to the ghosts they both shared. She barely waited for him to finish his coffee. The words tumbling out in a rush, the old box in her mother's attic. Aunt Lily's journal, the police reports, the locket, the feeling no, the certainty that something had been left unfinished all those years ago. I need you, she said quietly. I can't go back there alone. Not after what happened. Not with what I'm starting to find. And Cody, who'd spent his adult life rebuilding engines and ignoring the dark stories under his childhood bed, found himself nodding before he'd even thought it through. It was early afternoon by the time they set out. Boots crunching through the brittle snowpack slung heavy with water flashlights and Emma's battered notebook. The sky above the woods was a colorless blank clouds, pressing down, muting every sound except their breathing and the distant caw of a raven. The forest loomed ahead, a wall of tangled pine and ancient maple branches bowed by old ice and fresh snow. Somewhere the wind found its voice moaning through the upper boughs. For a while the walk felt almost normal. They talked like old friends, slipping easily into the comfort of shared history, how Cody once sprained his ankle trying to impress Emma by jumping the creek. How Emma used to scare the little kids with tales of the Wildwood witch. But the closer they got to the heart of the forest, the more the jokes faded, the more the silences grew. Each step pulled them deeper into Wildwood's memory, into a world that felt unchanged by time, untouched by grief or forgiveness. Emma led the way, boots leaving crisp marks over the remnants of an old game trail. She had Lily's journal out, glancing at the hand-drawn map, every few yards tracing the squiggle of the creek, the X, that marked the clearing, the note in Lily's hand. No footprints passed here. Cody trailed behind, eyes darting from tree to tree, every snap of a twig or distant bird call setting his nerves on edge. The woods were never quiet, but today the silence felt deliberate, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, watching. They stopped at the twisted old birch where 25 years earlier Emma's cousins had built their last snow fort. The tree's trunk was hollowed and blackened, now one side ripped open by lightning seasons ago. Cody traced a gloved hand over the rough bark, finding almost by accident the faintest carving. A+C, scratched by a child's unsteady hand. Emma was kneeling, brushing away snow near the tree's roots. She found an old candy wrapper, a plastic bead, the kind you'd string on a bracelet at summer camp. Elise loved these, she whispered, voice so thin Cody almost missed it. She'd leave them everywhere, like she thought if she marked her trail someone would always find her. Cody's reply was gentle but firm. Maybe that's what we're doing now. Maybe this is us finding her. They moved on, deeper still. The path narrowed, choked with thorn and old deadfall. The sun was just a pale shape somewhere behind the clouds, its light thin and directionless. Shadows pooled at their feet, shifting with every step until it felt like they were walking through something half alive and half remembered. After an hour, they reached the edge of the clearing. The clearing. Even blanketed in snow, it looked exactly as Emma remembered the ring of stones. Moss slicked green beneath the white, the center oddly flattened, as if something had been pressed into the earth there long ago. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of wax, and something older, colder. Emma crouched low, studying the stones. The carvings were still there, spirals and symbols worn smooth by decades of frost. She fished the locket from her pocket, comparing the designs on its back to those on the stones. They match, she murmured. Lily wrote that these spirals weren't natural, that she found the same shape on all the stones where kids disappeared. Cody moved around the edge, his boot suddenly kicking something metallic hidden beneath a drift. He knelt, heart hammering, and brushed away the snow. Emma, he called, voice urgent but hushed. Emma hurried over. There, half buried where the snow had crusted and refrozen, was another locket. This one was newer, less tarnished, the chain tangled in the brittle grass. Emma stared at it, her hands shaking as she picked it up. It was nearly identical to the one her aunt had saved, same eye-shaped face, same tiny clasp, the same impossible coldness against her palm. Cody's face paled. That can't be from before. That wasn't here last winter. I hiked through here in March, nothing. No one comes this far, Em. Not since. Emma didn't answer. She opened the locket. The inside was empty, save for a scrap of old blue fabric, just a thread, but familiar. Anna's scarf had been blue. Emma held the chain up, letting it spin in the weak light, and a sudden shiver ran down her back. It felt like the forest was watching, holding its breath. Cody looked around, suddenly uneasy. Do you feel that, he asked? Like we're not alone? He turned, scanning the trees, his breath fogging the air. The shadows seemed deeper, the stillness heavier. I don't like this, Emma. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like someone's out here. Like someone's always out here. Emma pocketed the locket, trying to steady herself. Lily wrote that too, she said. That every time she came here, she felt eyes on her. But nobody believed her. Cody tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow. Yeah, well, I believe her now. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The woods pressed in a living thing with secrets stitched into its roots. Cody's hand went to the small utility knife on his belt, a nervous habit. Emma pressed the journal to her chest, reading the lines Lily had underlined. They watch. They remember. They wait. The wind picked up, sending flurries spinning around them. Somewhere in the trees, something snapped a branch, or maybe just the weight of old snow. But both Emma and Cody jumped, hearts racing. Cody spun, scanning the tree line. For a second, Emma thought she saw movement, a shadow darting between the trunks there and gone. Did you see that? Cody whispered. Emma nodded, jaw clenched. Probably just a deer, she tried, but her voice was unconvincing, even to her own ears. Cody shook his head. No, that was bigger. And standing up. They stood in silence, every nerve straining. The only sound was their breath, the wind, the distant creak of trees. Emma forced herself to move, to keep looking. She examined each stone, running her gloved fingers over the spirals, looking for anything that felt out of place. At the far side of the circle, she found another mark, this one fresh, a boot print too large to be a child's pressed deep into the melting snow. Emma knelt, snapping a picture with her phone. "Someone's been here. Recently." Cody's voice was tight. "We should go. Now. Whatever this is, it's not finished. And I don't want to find out who's watching." Emma shook her head, resolve burning in her chest. "No, that's exactly why we can't leave. Someone wants this to stay buried. They want us scared. That's how they got away with it for so long. We have to keep going, Cody. For Lily, for the kids, for everyone who never got answers." Cody hesitated, fear warring with loyalty. He looked at Emma, saw the determination in her eyes, saw the girl he'd known, stubborn and wild, unwilling to back down from any dare. He nodded slowly. "Fine, but we do it together, and we're careful." The clouds darkened above them, twilight bleeding early into the woods. Emma stuffed the lockets, the journal, the photos into her pack, zipping it tight. She took one last look at the circle of stones, feeling the weight of all the years, all the secrets. Then she led the way out of the clearing. Cody just behind both of them, glancing back, hearts pounding, knowing finally that they weren't alone in Wildwood anymore. As they vanished into the shadowed trees, the wind died and the woods grew quiet again. The only trace of their presence, a set of fresh boot prints and 2 silver lockets glinting in the gathering dark, waiting for the next secret to come to light. The night had fallen hard with the sky above Wildwood, pressing so close it felt as though the stars themselves were being smothered. Emma and Cody's campfire struggled against the dark flames flickering low, its heat no match for the chill that crept up from the frozen ground. Their tent, a bright orange beacon in a field of snow and old needles, seemed laughably small against the ancient bones of the forest. Yet inside, wrapped in layers and armed with thermoses of lukewarm tea, they found the courage to return to Lily's journal, their only real weapon against the wilderness and against what might be waiting for them just beyond the thin fabric walls. Emma had been reading for hours, flashlight trembling in her grip. The journal's pages were filled with hurried scrawl blotches of ink diagrams and lines that wound in and out of margins. The deeper she read, the more Lily's neat police hand became jagged and desperate. Cody slouched across from her, pored over a tangle of copied maps and photocopied news articles, each one marked by Lily with exclamation points, red circles, or angry lines that cut through paragraphs like wounds. Their voices dropped low, as if the woods could hear. "Listen to this," Emma whispered, tracing a line with her finger. "Map of sanctuary markers, Act 2096. Candle stubs found near the old Blackwell Gate, crow feathers, wax pooled in spiral, all sites within a 2-mile radius. Residents claim ignorance. Sheriff non-compliant." She paused, breath fogging in the cold. "Cody, she's got coordinates, dates here and here. And always that name. Blackwell." Cody pulled the map closer, brows drawn tight. He had a knack for puzzles, the kind of mind that saw patterns where others saw only chaos. He connected the dots. Lily had left places where children had vanished, where trinkets were found, where Blackwell's name cropped up in old deeds and police statements. When he finished, he sat back, a sharp exhale leaving his lips. "Emma," he said, voice rough. "Look at this." He spun the map so she could see. He'd used her highlighter to trace a line circling each missing child's site, each ritual marker, until the shape revealed itself a perfect spiral, coiling out from the heart of the woods, tightening at its center. The sanctuary spiral. Emma's hands went cold, the flashlight wavering. "It's not random," she whispered. "It's a pattern. Every disappearance, every marker. It's all planned, orchestrated. It's been happening for decades." She found the Blackwell name again and again on a land grant from the 1800s, in an interview with a caretaker who'd heard singing in the woods in Lily's last desperate entry. There's something in the center. That's where it ends. Or where it began. Outside, the wind twisted through the trees, and for a moment Emma heard something just at the edge of perception. Not an animal, not the wind. Something walking slow and careful, crunching through the snow. She swallowed, tried to focus. "The sanctuary," she murmured. Lily called it that, a ritual ground. She said she found rings of stones with wax and feathers. always with the spiral. She thought it was connected to the old Blackwell family that they started it. But the town doesn't talk, Cody finished for her. They never do. Not about the Millers, not about the Woods, and never about the Blackwells. Emma flipped a few more pages, hands shaking. She found Lily's attempt to reconstruct the map, rough sketches of trees, a path winding past the creek, a circle at the heart, labeled simply Sanctuary. Notes scrawled beside it. Oldest oak. Spiral etched in bark. Voices at midnight. Wax in the snow. Don't go alone. Cody's mouth tightened. She was so close. She saw what they were doing, and nobody listened. Emma wanted to argue, but she remembered her own mother's words, the way the whole town flinched away from the past. People didn't want to listen. Easier to be afraid of the woods than to admit the monsters were real. She flipped the journal to a new page, a list of names. Not just Miller, but 3 other children all vanished between 1965 and 1989. One was listed as Sarah B., daughter of caretaker last seen by Blackwell grave. Another Jonas F., vanished at Sanctuary wax found. Cody whistled low. Nobody ever talked about other missing kids, Em. Just your family. The rest, they just disappeared and the woods ate the stories. Emma's eyes burned. She forced herself to keep reading, determined to map every note, every clue until the truth was too big to hide. She read Lily's last lines before her handwriting grew scattered frantic. I saw them. Cloaks, masks, the fire in the center. Singing in a tongue I didn't know. The spiral's not a path, it's a cage. They feed it, and the woods never die. The fire popped, sending sparks into the dark. Cody jumped, nerves wound tight. He closed his notebook, scanning the tree line beyond the faint circle of firelight. I don't like this, he admitted. We should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. Emma nodded reluctantly, tucking Lily's journal back into its pouch. But as she zipped herself into her sleeping bag, she couldn't stop seeing that spiral, the way it wound tighter and tighter, always to the center. She wondered if the Blackwells had drawn the first lines, or if the woods themselves had shaped the family. Outside, the wind rose and fell. Cody's breathing even soft and steady in the quiet. Emma lay awake, staring at the tent's low ceiling, listening to the endless forest night. That's when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, careful, but not animals circling their camp. She held her breath, pulse racing. The steps paused just outside the tent. There was a hush, a waiting. Emma reached for her flashlight, every muscle locked. The zipper of the tent door glinted in the faint firelight, a fragile border between safety and the world beyond. Then from just outside, a shadow slid across the fabric, a human silhouette, long and thin, flickering in the wind like a ghost. Emma's breath caught, and she squeezed Cody's arm. He woke with a gasp, sitting up wide-eyed. She mouthed, "Someone's outside." Together they listened as the shadow lingered, then vanished, melting back into the forest, without a word, without a trace. For a long moment, neither moved. The silence pressed in deep and cold, and the only sound was the frantic beat of their hearts, echoing the spiral they'd found on the map, always winding back to the center, always bringing them closer to the secret that had haunted Wildwood for generations. In the deep hours of the night, Emma finally slept, haunted by dreams of old oak trees, voices in the dark, and the sanctuary spiral burning through the snow, promising that the real story was just beginning. Morning came slow and cold, the kind of gray light that makes the forest look endless and ancient. Emma and Cody barely slept after the encounter. In the night, the shape passing by their tent, those cautious human footsteps muffled by the snow. Dawn brought only more questions and a gnawing sense of being watched. They broke camp quickly, moving in tense silence, alert to every crack of frost, every twitch of shadow in the underbrush. They didn't talk about what they'd heard. Some truths in Wildwood were too heavy to name. Instead, Emma led the way along the old logging road, Lily's journal clutched like a talisman. Cody carried their packs, eyes constantly scanning the tree line, his breath coming in short clouds. Somewhere high above, a raven called, a long, throaty sound that echoed in the brittle air. Not 20 minutes into the walk, Cody stopped dead. Emma, look. She turned. There, etched into the smooth skin of a white pine, was a spiral. Not a carving that time or weather could explain, but a deliberate, fresh-cut, precise, almost ritualistic, the bark peeled away to expose the pale flesh underneath. Next to it, 3 slashes, a symbol they'd seen before in Lily's notes. Emma reached out, fingers tracing the cold groove. It felt wrong, like touching something half alive. "There's another," Cody said, voice low. He pointed to a birch a dozen yards away, marked with a different sign, 2 concentric circles crossed by a jagged line. Emma moved closer, finding more signs, a triangle with a dot at its center, a crudely drawn eye, the number 5 repeating in tallies and crosses. All the marks were low at eye level, almost as if left for them to find. Emma snapped photos, her hands shaking. "These are warnings," she said. "Or directions. Whoever did this, they want us to know we're being watched." Cody's jaw clenched. "Or they want us to keep going, like bait." Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They pushed deeper into the woods, the marks growing denser, a path of symbols leading them off the old trail. Emma's heart thudded, the dread building with every step. The trees pressed closer together, branches tangling overhead, the sunlight growing thin and green. Then Cody stopped again, frowning. He was staring up into the fork of a maple, something glinting in the light. He boosted Emma up to look. Wedged in the crook of the branches was a tiny camera, its lens the size of a button wires, wound back along the trunk, half camouflaged by moss and bark. Emma froze, pulse roaring in her ears. That's not old," she whispered. "That's new. Someone's recording us." Cody scanned the trees, searching, and found another. And another. Small modern trail cameras, each fixed to a different vantage, each lens pointing in their direction. The cameras were expertly hidden, barely visible, but enough for Emma to count at least 6 in her immediate view. She felt exposed, vulnerable, in a way she hadn't anticipated. "We're not just being watched," she murmured. "We're being studied." Cody's face had gone pale. "This is wrong. This isn't just old ghosts or legends, Em. Someone's out here right now. They know exactly where we are." Emma's resolve hardened. "Then let's find them." They picked up their pace, the game shifting from investigation to something darker, a cat-and-mouse hunt, but they weren't sure who was chasing whom. As they wove between the trees, more symbols appeared, painted in red or black, scratched into bark, or built from stones in the snow. It was a language they didn't speak, but its meaning was clear. You are not alone. At the edge of a shallow ravine, they heard it, a branch snapping, hurried footsteps, someone moving fast but not running. Emma grabbed Cody's arm, signaling for silence. Together they edged forward, ducking behind a fallen log. That's when they saw him. A man in a heavy winter coat, his face hidden by a scarf and hood. He moved with purpose, not like a hiker or a hunter, but like someone who knew the woods intimately. He paused at a tree, pressed his palm to one of the symbols, and glanced around, eyes sharp, wary. His hands were gloved, but there was something ritualistic about the way he touched the mark. Emma's breath caught. Cody's hand drifted to his utility knife. Suddenly the man turned, spotting their movement. For a long moment he just stared, his eyes dark and cold, sizing them up. Then, without a word, he let out a guttural warning cry, half human, half animal, and bolted into the woods, vanishing between the trunks before they could react. Cody leapt up, but Emma grabbed his arm. "No," she hissed. "Don't chase. That's what he wants." They stood, hearts pounding, staring at the spot where the stranger had disappeared. The forest seemed to hold its breath. For a long moment, the only sound was the frantic rush of their own blood. Emma forced herself to move. He knew we were here. Maybe he's the one leaving the symbols, or maybe he's following orders. Cody glanced back at the cameras. This isn't just about the past anymore. Someone's running this place like a maze. They followed the last line of symbols, nerves raw, until the trees thinned and the air changed, a strange, almost sweet scent hanging in the cold. Up ahead, half buried in snow and brambles, was a house, if you could call it that. It looked abandoned, the roof half-collapsed, windows boarded over with warped, peeling planks. The door hung crooked, swinging in the breeze. All around, the snow was churned old tracks, mixing with new, a tangle of footprints circling the foundation. Emma led the way, her camera flashing. Inside, the air was thick and stale, heavy with the residue of old smoke and something metallic. Graffiti covered the walls, symbols matching those on the trees outside. In the center of the main room was a circle of melted wax blackened with soot. The remains of candles, feathers, bones, arranged in intricate spirals. Someone had dragged a heavy chair into the circle, its legs gouging the warped floorboards. Cody's flashlight swept across the room, picking out more evidence, bits of cloth, old photographs nailed to the walls, faces scratched out. In one corner, a pile of children's shoes. Emma's hands shook as she photographed everything, documenting the scene, every detail, a brick in the wall of horror that was Wildwood's truth. She found a mirror, its glass cracked, symbols etched around its edge. In its reflection, the room seemed to move, the candle wax flickering as if by an unseen breeze. For a moment, Emma saw herself standing in the center of the spiral. But not alone, a shadow hovered just behind her, tall and indistinct. Cody's voice broke the spell. "We have to get out of here, Emma, now!" She nodded, backing away. They hurried out into the snow, the abandoned house looming behind them, silent and watchful. The cameras, the symbols, the ritual circle, the man in the woods. Every piece of it wove together, a game designed for them and them alone. As they stumbled back into the trees, the sun dipped low, turning the sky to bruised violet. Emma realized with a cold certainty that the real game had only just begun. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. And every step they took was bringing them closer to the heart of Wildwood and to the truth that could finally break the cycle or destroy them both. The wind pressed at the windows, moaning through the frame of the tiny ranger's cabin, where Emma and Cody now sat, the last light of day fading to indigo. An old tape recorder, battered and yellowed, crackled on the table between them, its sound both brittle and haunting, a forgotten artifact unearthed from Lily's case box. Emma leaned close, elbows on knees, heart pounding in her chest as the story began, the voice of old Mr. Anders, Wildwood's oldest living witness, drifting out like smoke from another world. It was February 72. The voice rasped, every word heavy with memory. The night we lost Hannah, 9 years old. Everyone knew the tale's kids vanishing when the cold came in deep. That year, it was my girl. A sigh wet with grief. We found her mitten in the spruce, nothing else. Ground, trampled snow packed down like a dance or a chase, and carved there in the white was a spiral. Perfect, like someone took a compass to the snow. Sheriff said wolves. But my father, he told me the truth. Emma's breath caught. The legend she'd grown up with, the one her family never told in full, was now spoken out loud, clear as a bell. Mr. Anders's voice lowered, words slurring under the weight of old fear. It was the Blackwells. Always the Blackwells. Since before my daddy's time. Their estate sits at the center of this damn forest, choking the heart of Wildwood like a vine. They built their name on secrets. Blood for green, they used to say. Sacrifice so the land would flourish. Cody's hand gripped his knee so tight his knuckles whitened. He watched Emma, waiting, as if afraid to hear what came next. It wasn't just them, the tape continued, growing ragged. The mayor was there. The priest, too. Bankmen in wool coats, faces I still see in dreams. Every one of them keeping watch, everyone with a hand in it, called it sanctuary. They wore masks, some beast, some bird, all of them whispering, "Protect the wood, protect the town." The spiral's not just a symbol, it's a covenant. And every few years when the snow is thickest, someone's chosen. The tape ended abruptly. The silence in the room, electric and raw. For a moment, neither Emma nor Cody spoke. The weight of what they'd heard pressed down like a stone on both their chests. Outside, the trees groaned in the wind, branches scraping glass, as if the forest itself was listening. Emma reached for Lily's journal, flipping to the dog-eared pages with trembling fingers. "Listen to this," she whispered, reading the frantic scrawl, sanctuary ritual markers. Blackwell family at the center. Mayor present every year. Child missing always winter. Who decides? Who benefits? Why does the town stay silent? Names circled over and over, Blackwell, Holloway, Bennett, even the fire chief. And at the top of every list, The mayor. A flood of memories surged graduation day when Mayor Holloway's handshake lingered a little too long. The town fair, his easy laughter and quick glances when she passed. At every funeral for a lost child there, he stood a figure of comfort and order, his face unchanging, eyes always sharp. It all felt wrong now. Performative rehearsed something she hadn't let herself see until now. Cody was pacing. So the Blackwells built the cage, and the town's leaders made sure nobody ever broke it. It explains everything, Em. The old maps, the rituals, why nobody ever talks, why your aunt got shut down, why the police buried every real clue. Emma's jaw clenched as she read further. Lily says here the spiral isn't a path, it's a boundary. They draw it to keep something in, or maybe to keep us out. And the mayor's family, Holloway, they're the only ones left from the original council. Every other line's gone or run from Wildwood. It's always him, always at the center. A sudden memory cut through her. Her mother pale and shaking after the Millers vanished, whispering, "We don't talk about Wildwood, not to outsiders. They wouldn't understand. And if you ask the mayor for help, he'll only tell you to stay away from the woods." Back then, Emma thought it was fear or superstition. Now she saw it as something else. A warning passed down from someone who knew the price of speaking out. Cody's voice was low, nearly a growl. What if the mayor isn't just protecting the forest? What if he's protecting himself and his power? What if this is all about control? Emma looked up, determination burning in her eyes. We need to know more. The town records, the estate logs. If Lily was right, there's proof. And if Anders was telling the truth, then the mayor's not just a bystander. He's the one pulling every string. Cody hesitated, then nodded. We go tonight. No more waiting. Emma gathered the evidence photos pages, the old tape, her heart racing with dread and hope. She glanced again at the picture of the Blackwell estate in winter, its windows lit with fire-masked faces peering out into the snow. Behind them, always the mayor. A final note in Lily's journal caught her eye, a scrawled warning in the margin. They are always watching. Do not trust anyone from the council. Not even family. Emma traced the words with her thumb pulse pounding. Outside, the storm was growing. The night loomed large and alive. The time for asking permission was over. Emma slipped her boots on, buttoned her coat, and braced herself for what would come next. She glanced at Cody, saw the same resolve mirrored in his tired eyes. As they stepped into the storm, Emma knew the past wasn't just a story left behind in the snow. It was alive, pulsing under every inch of Wildwood, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to call it by its true name. And tonight, for the first time in decades, the past would have to answer. The air in Wildwood turned sharp and dangerous as the first hour of true night settled in black ice glinting beneath the streetlights, breath misting in clouds that seemed to hang and linger in the empty streets. Emma barely felt the cold. She strode up the cracked steps to her childhood home. Cody at her heels, both of them hollowed out by what they'd heard in the cabin, by the secrets pulsing under the surface of every family, every door, every piece of history in this town. Inside, the light was thin and yellow, her mother's hands twisting a dish towel into knots at the kitchen sink. She didn't turn when Emma called her name. Not at first, just stared out into the snow beyond the glass shoulders trembling beneath her old flannel shirt. "Mom," Emma said, voice low. "I need to talk to you. About Lily. About what happened to her." The silence stretched. Then her mother's voice broke worn raw. "It's not safe to keep digging. Lily was a good cop. She was careful. But she didn't know when to stop." Emma moved closer. Cody standing back tense. "What happened, Mom? Why did she quit the force? Why did she leave town?" Her mother finally turned, eyes red and wild. She didn't leave because she wanted to. She was forced out. After the Millers vanished, after she started looking into the Blackwell estate, she got warnings. Letters slipped under the door. Dead birds left on her porch. Phone calls with no voice, just breathing. Your aunt tried to go to the mayor. He told her she was obsessed, said she needed a break. The next day, her brakes failed on the road by the river. Emma's pulse thudded. That was an accident. That's what you always said. It wasn't. Her mother's voice was brittle. They wanted her scared. They wanted her to know the cost of asking too many questions. Her hands trembled as she poured coffee, then pushed the mug toward Emma. I tried to make her stop. I begged her. But she wouldn't listen. She thought she could save those children. She thought she could save this town. She was wrong. The clock ticked. Outside, the wind keened as if echoing her words. Emma felt the cold crawl under her skin, but her anger burned hot beneath it. "I'm not stopping," she whispered. "No matter what happens, I have to finish what she started." Her mother stared at her stricken. "Promise me you'll be careful, Emma. Promise me you'll leave if it gets too dangerous." Emma looked away, unable to promise something she had no intention of keeping. After her mother retreated to her room, Emma and Cody gathered their evidence, moving like shadows through the narrow halls, hearts heavy with dread and defiance. Every photograph, every taped interview, every frantic line in Lily's journal felt heavier. Now a weight they carried alone. When they stepped outside again, the world had changed. Nothing moved, no neighbors passed, and the silence was thick, like the whole town had decided to hold its breath. They took the long way back to their rented car, ducking between empty storefronts, heads down footsteps muffled by snow. That's when they heard it, a shuffle behind them, a low voice rising out of the dark. "You shouldn't be here." A man stood in the alley's shadow face, hidden by a scarf, but his eyes were fierce and wild. Beside him, two more figures, one a woman with iron-gray hair, the other a teenager with a hard jaw and hands buried deep in his coat. Emma's throat tightened. She knew these people, Mr. Beaulieu, who ran the hardware store, Mrs. Winters, who taught her how to skate on the frozen pond. Ordinary people standing together, blocking the way. "You and your friend," the man said, "should get back to Toronto while you still can. There are things in these woods that don't let go. We don't need more trouble. Not for you, not for us." Cody stepped forward, braver than he felt. "Are you threatening us?" Mrs. Winters shook her head, sorrow in her voice. "We're trying to save you. Ask anyone who lost a child. Ask them if they'd go back, if they'd pry open that wound again. Some things are best left alone." Emma's fury surged. "You're all just going to stand by and let it happen again? How many more kids have to vanish before you fight back?" The teenager spat in the snow. "You don't get it. Nobody here gets a choice." Emma's voice was a blade. "That's what my aunt thought. That's why she almost died. But she never gave up, and neither will I." Mr. Beaulieu's voice dropped, trembling. "This town eats its heroes, Emma. Sometimes it eats their children, too. That's the only warning you'll get." With that, the group melted back into the night, their footsteps vanishing into the hush as if they'd never been there at all. Emma stood frozen, Cody's hand on her shoulder. The snow had started falling again, thick, relentless, erasing every track, every sign that they'd ever been warned. But Emma's resolve had never felt sharper. The whole town could turn against her, and she would not stop. She thought of the faces of the lost, their eyes bright in old photographs, their names etched in the back of Lily's journal. She would not let them be forgotten. The next morning, the cold sun rose over a town that seemed smaller than ever. Every window shuttered, every conversation a secret. Emma and Cody packed their gear, checked their batteries, loaded their cameras and notepads, and braced themselves for the long walk back into Wildwood's heart. The last time she'd tried to say goodbye to her mother, the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply hugged her tight, as if that would keep them both safe from the secrets neither could escape. Her mother whispered into her ear, voice barely audible, "Be smarter than Lily. Be braver if you can. But please don't be alone." Emma wanted to say she wasn't afraid, but that would have been a lie. The fear was a river in her chest, cold and wild. But it could not wash away the burning hope, the stubborn, furious hope that the truth would matter. That the right story finally told could break Wildwood's curse. She glanced at Cody as they stepped off the porch. He smiled, nervous, fierce, ready. Together they walked down Main Street, watched by curtains and careful eyes. Every step felt heavier than the last. The world around them seemed to shrink and darken, as if the forest itself was closing in, warning them back. But Emma only squared her shoulders and walked faster toward the trees, toward the truth, toward the darkness that waited with open arms. Whatever lay at the center of the spiral, she would meet it head-on, unblinking, even if it was the last thing she ever did. The forest that morning was a cathedral of frozen silence, ancient trunks looming like pillars, the pale light knifing down through boughs heavy with snow. Emma's boots cracked through a crust of ice. With every step, the air sharp enough to sting her lungs, breath pluming as she and Cody moved deeper into Wildwood, drawn by a desperate, reckless need to reach the truth before it disappeared again. They hiked in tight formation, nerves raw, a sense of unseen eyes following them along every winding deer path. It started with a tremor in Emma's jacket pocket, her phone buzzing with a new notification, then another. She pulled it free, confused. No signal in these woods, not for miles. But the screen flickered to life anyway. At first, she saw only static, then the blur resolved into a grainy green-lit image, her own face filmed from above, breath hanging in the frigid air, Cody's silhouette just behind. The camera panned, tracking them as they walked. Emma spun on her heel gaze, searching the treetops. Somewhere out there, someone was watching. A message scrawled in red slid across the video. "Keep moving." Her hands trembled. Cody swore under his breath. "They're in the network, Em. They're in our heads. We need to get out of sight." But there was no cover, just the cold and the shadows and the crunch of their boots on snow. As they pushed on, more notifications pinged in each one. A new angle, their camp last night, the old house, even a close-up of Emma's face as she slept, mouth open in a silent gasp. She realized with horror that the cameras weren't just for them. They were a warning, a promise, a threat. The trail narrowed, winding between firs so close together they had to turn sideways to pass. The woods here felt old, undisturbed. But then came another buzz, a new video. This one showed the two of them, but only seconds before Emma recognizing the blue of Cody's jacket, the flash of his orange beanie as he knelt to tie his boot. Then the camera jolted a new message, "Run." Emma's heart hammered. She shouted for Cody, "Go now," and they bolted, plunging through snow, every sense screaming. Branches whipped her face, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The woods pressed in tighter, as if the whole world were funneling her toward a single, inevitable point. Cody was just ahead, stumbling over a fallen log. Emma reached for him, grabbing his arm, but in that instant, a wire snapped up from beneath the snow. A snare expertly hidden. Cody was yanked off his feet, crashing hard into the white, his cry muffled by the forest. Emma scrambled to help, but her gloves slipped on ice, her knees sinking deep. Another wire glinted, slicing at her calf. She barely dodged, rolling clear. But Cody was trapped. The snare had cinched tight around his ankle, dragging him backward toward the darkness beneath a collapsed pine. Emma screamed his name, clawing at the wire. But something struck her across the shoulder, a flash of pain, the taste of blood in her mouth, and she went down, face pressed into snow. Footsteps thundered close, then retreated, boots crunching, a shadow passing over her as she fought for breath. When Emma struggled upright, Cody was gone. The only sign he'd ever been there was a single boot torn free from his foot, still steaming in the icy air. Panic and guilt slammed through her, a wave that nearly knocked her flat. "Cody," she yelled, voice tearing from her throat. Nothing answered but the wind. Frantic, Emma spun in circles, searching for footprints. Blood, any sign of where he'd been taken? There was nothing but churned snow and broken branches, a practiced, efficient abduction carried out in seconds. Her phone buzzed again. She nearly hurled it into the trees, but forced herself to look. Another video, this time, darker, grainy shot in near black. Cody's face wild with fear, illuminated by a single flashlight. He was being dragged, his muffled voice pleading, "Emma, don't." The feed cut out, replaced by text. "If you want your friend back, come to Sanctuary at sunset. Come alone." Her pulse stuttered, then steadied. The rules were changing. Now she was the one being hunted. Her every movement anticipated the spiral closing around her with every passing second. She checked her gear, her camera, her battered notebook, Lily's journal. Everything was still there, but it felt like armor made of paper and hope useless against the real living darkness that had swallowed her best friend. Emma wanted to scream, to collapse, to rage at the sky. But she could not afford fear, not now. She was all Cody had, wiping the blood from her cheek. Emma pressed deeper into the woods, following her instincts, listening for anything. Footsteps, broken branches, a whisper of Cody's voice on the wind. But Wildwood offered nothing but silence, cold and absolute. The world narrowed to the thump of her heart and the hiss of her own breathing. At the forest's edge, she paused to gather herself, fighting panic, remembering her mother's warning, "Don't be alone." But there was no choice. This was the price of truth. This was what it meant to chase ghosts, to refuse to look away. A flicker of memory rose her Aunt Lily, bold and stubborn, staring down the town council. Her mother's whispered plea, "Don't be a hero." Emma's hands shook as she typed a message to her mother. "I'm sorry. I have to finish this. I'll come home when it's over. I love you." The sun was dropping, turning the sky to bruised violet, the cold deepening. Emma checked her watch. 2 hours until sunset. 2 hours until the next move in this game of shadows. She tightened her scarf, breathed deep, and stepped back into the trees. Every footfall was a promise she would not fail. Cody would not turn away, would not become another name in a list of the lost. The path to sanctuary would be dark and full of teeth. But she walked it anyway, alone and unafraid, with the whole weight of Wildwood at her back and the last hope for the living, guiding her forward one determined step at a time. Emma wandered beneath a ceiling of gnarled branches and lowering sky. The only sound, her ragged breath and the faint crunch of her boots over ice. The map from Lily's journal was folded and worn in her palm, annotated in faded ink with coordinates and cryptic notes. Spiral clearing old quarry circle of stones, and finally beneath them, all the mouth cave beneath the oldest tree. She moved with the urgency of desperation, Cody's terrified face imprinted behind her eyes, the threat of sunset ticking closer with every heartbeat. The deeper she pressed into Wildwood, the stranger the world became. The trees pressed close, their trunks carved with the symbols she now recognized as warnings, twisted spirals, runes, the sigil of the Blackwell family. Frosted moss clung to every rock. Snow muffled the landscape into a hushed cathedral. Once Emma stopped, certain she heard someone matching her pace between the trees, but when she spun there was only silence. Only the forest holding its secrets close. She kept moving. The map led her past the circle of 5 ancient stones, worn smooth by 1,000 winters, and down a ravine slick with hidden ice. Her phone, long since denied a signal, vibrated again, a final message. "This is your last chance. Turn back." She deleted it without hesitation. She found the mouth of the cave just where the map said it would be, beneath an ancient fallen cedar. Its tangled roots gripping the hillside like fingers, half-frozen earth yawning open. Emma fumbled for her flashlight and ducked inside, bracing for anything, a snare, a scream, a corpse. But only cold and darkness greeted her. The air stank of damp stone and old rotting leaves laced with the ghost of wood smoke and iron. The light swept over slick stone walls, glinting off something metallic. Emma's pulse leapt. At first it looked like a shrine, an altar of bones and broken jewelry. Children's shoes and dolls arranged in careful lines across a slab of black rock. Emma's hands shook as she touched a tiny sneaker, its Velcro strap stained with age. A silver locket, almost identical to the one found on the snow all those years ago, lay on a folded scrap of faded tartan. She realized with a sick lurch that these were not just keepsakes, but trophies. There were more hundreds of photos tacked to the walls, curling at the edges. Black and white portraits of children from another century, faded Polaroids from the 1970s and 80s. The missing posters of her own childhood, now yellow and brittle. And there near the center, 4 smiling girls, her cousins, the Miller sisters, posed on a snowy morning, unaware the camera captured the last image anyone would ever see of them alive. A boxy TV sat in the corner, powered by a whirring generator. Emma pressed play, bile rising in her throat. The screen flickered to life. Shaky home video footage of ritual gatherings beneath Wildwood's trees, masked figures in animal pelts chanting around bonfires. She saw children pushed into the circle, trembling blindfolded, while adults in ceremonial robes intoned words in an ancient forgotten tongue. The camera lingered for one endless moment on the face of the man leading the rites, a young haunted boy in the mask of a stag, his eyes full of terror and fury. As the years passed, the boy became a man. His mask more elaborate, his robes finer, his posture regal, familiar in a way that made Emma's blood run cold. A cough echoed behind her. Emma whirled flashlight beams stabbing at the darkness. Footsteps advanced, measured deliberate boots scraping over stone. From the mouth of the cave, a figure appeared haloed by the sickly orange glow of dusk. He moved with authority, every step a pronouncement, his shadow stretching monstrous across the shrine. Emma tensed heart, battering her ribs, ready to run or fight. He stepped into the beam. The stag mask came off. It was the Mayor Holloway. His hair was silvered, face lined by age, and the cold, cunning pride of a survivor. In his left hand, he held Cody's phone. In his right, a silver medallion, the symbol of sanctuary. "Welcome, Emma," he said, voice smooth as ice. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me." Emma's mind raced, searching for logic for escape. "Why?" Her voice was a hoarse whisper. "Why them? Why any of us?" He smiled, the kind of smile only men who have outlived their guilt can manage. Tradition. Survival. Wildwood owes its life to sacrifice. Your family, my family, we are bound to the land. Only those who understand the price can pay it. Only those who survive may rule. She shook her head, fury trembling in her bones. "You killed them. You took everything." "I was a child too," once he replied, tone almost gentle. "I watched my own siblings disappear in the blizzard of '66. I survived because I learned the lesson: you either feed the woods or you become part of them. I became what I had to, and now so must you." Emma glanced at the altar, at her cousins' faces, at the endless parade of the missing, the stolen, the sacrificed. A century of silence and complicity glared back at her. The mayor's gaze bore into her, daring her to move, to challenge, to change the story. Outside, the last light bled away darkness pouring into the cave like floodwater. Emma braced herself for whatever came next, feeling at once completely alone and more connected than ever to the generations of children whose voices had never been heard, whose stories had ended here in this black heart of Wildwood. The truth was no longer buried. It was standing before her, mask in hand, demanding its due. The cave's air felt thick, damp, ancient. Every breath Emma took seemed loaded with the weight of old sins and the unyielding cold of stone and bone. Her flashlight's beam wavered, slicing the shadows where the mayor, no, the architect of so much suffering, stood poised, an unblinking stag mask dangling from his hand like a grim trophy. For a heartbeat, Emma felt time collapse, all the lost children, all the silence, all the generations who'd been taught that survival here had a price. The price had always been blood. The mayor's voice was almost gentle, as if coaxing a child to bed. "You have to understand, Emma. We don't do this for pleasure. Wildwood is special, these trees, this earth. In the old language, it means sanctuary. This is a place that hungers, and to keep it alive, to keep all of us alive, a sacrifice must be made. Once every generation, the land chooses, and the keeper, my family, obeys. My power is the forest's gift for obedience. It's always been that way. And if you destroy me, the forest will turn on all of us. You think you're saving your friend, but you're condemning the town." Emma stared him down, fury and disbelief warring in her chest. "You're insane. There's nothing sacred about murder. There's no contract but your own cowardice." He smiled, a small, tight, haunted thing. "You sound like Lily Grant. She said the same thing just before her accident. But she was wrong. The woods don't care about innocence, only continuity. And I care about Wildwood." He raised the medallion, a symbol heavy as an executioner's axe. "If you want your friend, you'll take your place. The land will have what it needs." At that, he pressed a concealed switch in the altar. A deep, grinding groan rolled through the cavern as a hidden door cracked open in the far wall, releasing a waft of air that stank of damp and rot. Beyond, a stone passage stretched into pitch blackness. Emma's skin prickled. "Where is he?" she spat. "In the crypt," the mayor said, voice flat. "If you hurry, you might save him. Or you might die trying. Either way, the land will be fed." Emma ran. The flashlight jounced in her hand, its beam jittering off walls lined with strange carvings. Spidery runes, spirals within spirals, faces warped with terror. She staggered over slick stones, lungs burning, mind whirling with every horror story she'd ever heard about these woods. At the passage's end, she found a heavy iron grate. Beyond it, Cody slumped, his face smeared with blood and dirt, one eye swollen shut. "Emma," he groaned, voice hoarse. She fell to her knees, clutching the grate, panic threatening to break her. "Cody, are you hurt? Can you move?" He managed a weak grin, teeth pink with blood. "Only if you've got the world's strongest crowbar." Before she could answer, a sudden shudder rumbled through the cave. Then the mayor appeared behind her, clutching a knife carved from antler. His face maskless eyes wild with the conviction of the zealot. "You have a choice, Emma. Free him and take his place, or turn around and walk away. The land remembers. It will not forgive you." Emma scrambled for anything. A rock, a shard of glass, the rusted edge of a lantern. She hurled it at the mayor, buying precious seconds as he staggered, cursing. She grabbed a loose iron rod and smashed at the grate, praying for it to give. It bent, screaming in protest, but not enough. Cody reached through his fingers, closing on her wrist. "Go, Emma. Don't. No." She wrenched at the grate, sweat and blood streaking her palms. "I'm not leaving you. We finish this together." The mayor was closing in, knife flashing. "You cannot break the circle," he growled, low and guttural. "The spiral must close." Emma dodged the blade, catching her sleeve, tearing through wool and grazing skin. She shrieked, spinning away, backing the mayor toward the altar where the flickering TV still played its endless loop of the lost. In that moment, Cody somehow impossibly forced his body through the gap Emma had widened. He crashed to the floor, rolling to his feet, blood streaking his cheek. The mayor lunged, knife raised. Cody braced himself, and Emma, desperate, smashed the altar's generator with her heel. Sparks flew, plunging the cave into flickering half-darkness. The TV died, leaving only the echo of old voices and the heavy animal breathing of the men locked in struggle. The mayor slashed wildly, but Cody caught his wrist, twisting. Emma leapt, driving her shoulder into the mayor's ribs, sending all three of them sprawling across the stone. The knife clattered away, skittering beneath the altar. For a moment, all was chaos, grunts, fists, the crunch of bone on rock. Emma tasted blood, felt the burn of cold in her lungs, the sheer terror of the dark pressing in from every side. Then Cody, with a surge of strength born from panic and hope, locked the mayor's arms behind his back, pinning him with a length of rope scavenged from the floor. Emma crawled for the knife, panting, ready for another attack. But the mayor, now truly beaten, glared up, every breath a curse. "You think you've won," he hissed, voice echoing off stone. "But the land never forgets. The spiral always returns. You broke the pattern, but you can't erase it. Not while a single root still grows here." Emma pressed the knife to his throat, hands shaking. For a long, frozen moment, she considered what justice really meant. Revenge or survival, mercy or an end to the horror. But Cody's hand closed gently over hers, grounding her, pulling her back from the edge. She let the knife drop, heart hammering, the taste of freedom and finality thick on her tongue. They left the mayor, trussed and powerless. The cave suddenly smaller, the spirits of the lost seeming to press close. Watching, perhaps finally at peace. Emma and Cody limped toward the mouth of the cave together, broken but unbowed, leaving behind the echoes of the past and the last gasping vestiges of the sanctuary's grip on Wildwood. The snow had started to fall again, blanketing their footprints, erasing the blood. This time they would not look back. The cold night pressed in around them like a shroud as Emma stood over the bound mare, the frigid air slicing through her jacket, biting at her skin. The heavy wooden door of the cave had slammed shut behind them, muffling the distant sounds of the forest and leaving only the faint whisper of wind through the trees. Snowflakes drifted silently down, settling on the moss and rocks around the ancient roots that had cradled the mayor's exhausted body. Emma held the thick rope tightly in her hands, her knuckles white from the pressure. Cody stood nearby, his breath steady, but his eyes never leaving the man who had orchestrated so much pain in this town, Mayor Holloway, the last living link to the dark, twisted history of Wildwood. The mayor looked up, his face pale in the moonlight, lined with decades of secrets and regrets. His silver hair was tangled and dusted with snow. Despite his weariness, his eyes shone with a chilling clarity, calculating and urgent. "Emma?" His voice was hoarse, cracked by age and desperation, but carried an unexpected plea. "You don't understand what you're holding in your hands. This isn't just about me. It's about the entire town, the people who live here, the land itself. If you expose everything, you won't just destroy me, you'll tear Wildwood apart. Families, businesses, livelihoods, everything this town depends on will crumble. The foundation will shatter." Emma's chest tightened. The weight of the moment settled deep inside her, as cold and heavy as the snow-covered earth beneath their feet. She met his gaze unwavering. "How can you say that? You sacrificed innocent children. You orchestrated decades of lies and terror. You made this place a prison. You're not a guardian, you're a monster." The mayor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something almost like sorrow crossing his features before hardening into resolve. "I did what I had to do to keep this place alive. Wildwood isn't just a town, it's a sanctuary, a sacred space. The forest, it demands balance, it hungers. And to keep the land alive, sacrifices must be made. It's not power I wield, it's survival. This town owes its existence to that pact." Cody's voice cut through the silence, firm and sharp. "Emma, this isn't survival. It's control disguised as tradition. This isn't a pact. It's a cage made of fear and blood. The people deserve the truth. The whole town deserves justice, no matter how painful." Emma swallowed hard, struggling to steady her racing heart. Her mind swirled with the enormity of what lay ahead. Exposing this secret would shatter everything. The trust between neighbors, the town's fragile peace, even the very identity of Wildwood itself. The consequences were immense. She glanced around at the towering ancient trees, looming like silent witnesses, their twisted branches clutching the sky. Snow settled softly over the ground, like a blanket muffling the world's noise and masking the dark past that had festered beneath. Emma's thoughts drifted involuntarily to her mother's whispered warnings, to the frightened faces of those who had lost children to this unspeakable darkness, and to the images of the Miller sisters forever frozen in time. Her gaze shifted to Cody, battered and bruised but unbroken, his unwavering determination a beacon in the darkness. The stubborn hope in his eyes had been her anchor through every moment of doubt and fear. The mayor's voice softened, laden with a desperate plea. "Please, Emma. Think of the families still here struggling to live normal lives. The fragile peace that keeps this town from falling into chaos. You hold their fate in your hands. Choose wisely." Emma's fingers clenched tighter around the rope. Her voice was steady, though her heart felt as fragile as the icy ground beneath her feet. "I don't know if I can carry this alone." Cody stepped closer, his presence reassuring and fierce. "You're not alone. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Emma took a long, shuddering breath and looked once more at the man who had been both victim and villain, guardian and predator. In that moment, she realized justice was not just about punishment. It was about healing a broken community, about rebuilding trust and hope where only silence and fear had lived. Her mind flashed back to the faces of the missing children, the faces in the photos and videos littered throughout the cave-in. Innocent, hopeful, stolen too soon. She thought of the sacrifices made, the lies told to protect a fragile illusion. She thought of her own family's pain, the generations marked by this dark legacy. The mayor's voice echoed again, softer this time, almost resigned. "The spiral never truly ends. You may have broken this cycle, but the forest remembers. It waits for the next keeper, for the next sacrifice. Do you think you can change what's been written in the soil for centuries?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, not of weakness, but of fierce determination. "No. I'm going to rewrite the story. This ends now. Cody's hand found hers steady and strong. Together they moved to stand over the mayor, not as executioners, but as bearers of truth. Emma knelt and looked the mayor in the eye. You will face justice, but not just for what you've done for the silence that let it happen. The people deserve to know. They deserve to heal. The mayor let out a bitter laugh, ragged and hollow. You think they'll forgive you, or me the forest will keep calling? And Wildwood will never be the same. Emma rose, heart pounding with resolve. Wildwood will be better. She motioned to Cody, who stepped forward to call the authorities. The weight of the night's burden felt lighter with each passing moment, the first rays of dawn beginning to pierce the horizon, promising a new day, a chance for truth to break free, and for Wildwood to finally breathe. As the snow continued to fall silent and pure, Emma felt a flicker of hope kindle within her, fragile but fiercely alive. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. The town's wounds were deep, and the past would not easily let go. But for the first time in decades, justice was no longer a secret buried beneath the trees. It was a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The dawn broke over Wildwood like a fragile promise, pale light slipping through the dense canopy, turning the frost-laden branches into glittering sentinels, watching over a land forever changed. Emma stood at the edge of the ancient forest, the weight of everything she'd uncovered pressing heavy on her shoulders. But within that burden flickered a fierce resolve. This was not just an end. It was a beginning, a chance to rewrite the story for the generations still to come. Behind her, Mayor Holloway sat in a dimly lit room of the town hall, the sting of defeat heavy in his eyes, but tempered by the begrudging recognition that the tides had turned. Emma's discovery of his darkest secrets had shattered the illusion of control he had wielded for decades. And now, armed with that knowledge, she was determined to ensure that no more children would be lost to the shadows of Wildwood. With unwavering purpose, Emma presented the mayor with a stark ultimatum, a binding commitment to dismantle the sinister rituals that had poisoned their community for generations, and to establish protections strong enough to safeguard every child within their borders. The mayor, his usual veneer of calm, cracked by the gravity of his position, understood that his survival hinged on this agreement. The fear of exposure of legal consequences and the irreversible damage to his legacy forced his hand. Reluctantly, he signed the pledge, a document that would become a cornerstone in Wildwood's path toward healing. But Emma knew that justice alone would not be enough to mend the wounds inflicted upon families who had lived decades in silence, haunted by the disappearance of their children. With that in mind, she spearheaded the creation of a memorial, deep within the heart of Wildwood, the Wildwood Sanctuary Memorial. A solemn tribute carved from stone and glass, etched with the names and faces of those stolen away. The memorial's circle of 5 smooth stones echoed the ancient symbols of the forest, offering a place where grief could find voice and where the living could find solace in remembrance. On the day of the memorial's unveiling, the air was thick with emotion. Families came from near and far, their tears mingling with the crisp breeze as they laid flowers and whispered prayers beneath the towering pines. Emma moved among them, her heart heavy, but tempered by the strength she saw in their faces, a collective courage to face the past and forge a future free from fear. Yet beneath the surface of this public reckoning, Emma carried a secret burden. She had chosen not to reveal the full extent of what she had uncovered in Wildwood's depths, the unspoken truths, the rituals buried beneath layers of time, the names and faces that might never come to light. Some parts of the forest, she understood, were meant to remain untouched, their shadows too deep, their power too raw. The mystery was a guardian in itself, a dark thread woven into the fabric of the land, waiting for the moment when it might no longer threaten, but protect. In quiet moments, Emma found herself returning to the edge of the forest, standing where the ancient roots gripped the earth and the wind whispered through the branches. She placed her hand on the rough bark of the oldest tree, feeling the pulse of life beneath the surface, the same life that had demanded so much blood and yet still held the hope of renewal. She whispered a silent vow to protect this land, to honor its past, but never to let its darkness claim another soul. As the seasons turned and Wildwood slowly began to breathe anew, Emma's story became one of healing and cautious hope, a reminder that even in the deepest shadows, light could find its way. The past would never be forgotten, but it need not define the future. And sometimes she thought the greatest strength lay not in revealing every secret, but in choosing which ones to keep safe buried deep beneath the roots and stones, where they could no longer harm, but might one day teach. The forest watched over her, and she watched over it, a silent guardian of the sanctuary they had both fought so hard to save. The early morning sun filtered through the towering pines of Wildwood, its gentle light casting long golden fingers across the forest floor where wildflowers were already beginning to bloom in bursts of purple, yellow, and white. The scent of damp earth, mingled with pine resin and the soft rustling of leaves, whispered promises of renewal. For the first time in 25 years, the forest seemed to breathe freely, as if shaking off the heavy cloak of sorrow and silence that had weighed upon it for decades. This day was more than just another sunrise. It was a beginning, a fragile but powerful awakening for the land and the people whose lives had been entwined with its dark history. Emma stood quietly near the newly erected memorial, a simple but elegant circle of 5 smooth stones set upon a bed of polished granite etched with the names and dates of the lost children faces, once bright and full of life, now immortalized in stone. She looked around at the gathering of families, friends, and neighbors who had come together from across the region. Their faces bore the unmistakable marks of grief and resilience, eyes rimmed with tears, but filled with a glimmer of hope that had long been absent. Mothers clutched weathered photographs, fathers held their children close, siblings stood shoulder to shoulder, bound by the pain of absence but united in purpose. Next to her, Cody adjusted the wooden altar they had built for this occasion. It was adorned with flickering candles, fresh wildflowers gathered from the nearby meadows, and small mementos, handmade tokens, colorful ribbons, and delicate feathers that each family had brought as offerings to the lost souls. The altar was a beacon of light and remembrance. Amid the towering ancient trees, a sacred space where the community could gather to honor, mourn, and begin the process of healing. The ceremony began in hushed reverence. One by one, family members stepped forward to light their candles, the flames dancing softly in the cool morning air. The collective glow of hundreds of tiny fires illuminated the faces of those who had come seeking peace. The whispered prayers that followed were heavy with emotion. Names spoken aloud, memories shared, hearts broken open. The atmosphere was thick with love and sorrow, but beneath it all ran a current of release, as if the very forest absorbed their grief and offered something in return. Emma's voice broke the silence, steady but filled with raw emotion. For 25 years, we have lived under a shadow. We have been haunted by loss, silence, and fear. But today, we stand together to honor those we lost, to release their spirits from the chains of the past, and to reclaim our lives from the darkness. Her words hung in the air, carried on the gentle breeze like a promise. Cody stepped forward next, his voice rising in a solemn chant he had learned from the ancient journals Emma discovered during their investigation. The chant was a call for peace and protection, invoking the natural spirits of the forest, the earth, and the sky. The cadence of their voices wove together with the rustling leaves, creating a haunting harmony that seemed to seep into the soil itself. The final note faded, and a sudden hush fell over the crowd. Then a gentle wind stirred the trees, lifting the candle flames and sending a shower of golden light through the canopy, as if the forest itself was responding, offering a benediction for the healing underway. Emma felt a deep stirring inside her, a lightness she hadn't known in years. It was the first breath of peace since the terrible day the Miller sisters disappeared. Around her, broken families began to find each other again. Strangers embraced, tears streaming freely, but mingled now with smiles of relief and renewed connection. The silent walls built by fear and suspicion started to crumble as voices joined together in shared grief and hope. The forest, too, seemed to awaken from a long slumber. The trees that once loomed ominously now stood like ancient guardians, their branches swaying gently in a rhythm that echoed new life. The wildflowers carpeting the ground swelled in brilliant colors, their petals opening wide to the warming sun. Birds absent for so long returned with joyful songs that filled the air, their melodies weaving through the crowd like threads of healing. Emma's mind drifted to her own family, the wounds inflicted by years of fear and silence. the fractured relationships slowly mending as truth was brought into the light. She realized that Wildwood was no longer a place of darkness and dread, but a sanctuary, reborn a symbol of resilience and renewal. As the ceremony drew to a close, Emma and Cody moved among the crowd, helping families place small stones around the memorial's base. Each stone represented a promise, a memory, and a commitment to move forward without forgetting the past. Children laughed softly, their voices tentative but free, and even the oldest attendees found solace in the sense of community rekindled. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the earth and bathing the forest in light. As people began to depart, Emma lingered a moment longer, kneeling beside a cluster of wildflowers. Her fingers brushed against the soft petals, and she felt the pulse of life beneath her touch, a living testament to hope and rebirth. This place, once steeped in shadows, was now alive with possibility. Emma knew the journey ahead would be long and filled with challenges. The scars of the past could not be erased overnight, and not all secrets had been uncovered. But for the first time, hope was not just a fragile dream. It was a tangible, growing force, rooted in community courage and the collective will to heal. With Cody by her side, she took a deep breath, the crisp forest air filling her lungs. Together they faced the future, not as victims of history, but as guardians of a new beginning in a forest that had finally learned to forgive. And as the gentle breeze carried the echoes of their ceremony deep into the woods, Emma felt a profound connection, not just to the land but to the people who called it home. The past would remain part of Wildwood's soul, but it no longer held them captive. Here among the trees and wildflowers, life was returning, and with it, the promise of peace. The last light of day slipped through the thick canopy of wildwood, painting the forest floor in hues of amber and deep shadow. Emma sat alone at her small, weathered desk in the modest cabin that had become her refuge over these past weeks, a quiet sanctuary where she had pored over notes, photographs, and recordings that told the harrowing story of Wildwood's darkest secrets. The room was scattered with papers, maps marked with spirals and circles, and an open laptop glowing softly in the dimming light. This was her final act here, the culmination of years of pain and investigation, the telling of a story that refused to be buried any longer. Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating just a moment before she began to type. The words flowed out slowly at first, heavy with emotion, then gaining strength and clarity. This was not just a report. It was a testimony to the resilience of the human spirit, to the power of truth shining through layers of deception and fear. It was a story about loss, yes, but also about hope, about the healing that comes when darkness is faced head-on and the light is allowed in. Her piece unfolded like a tapestry, weaving together the disappearances of the Miller sisters, the secrets of the Blackwell family, the shadowy sanctuary rituals, and the courage of those who dared to uncover the truth. Emma highlighted not only the horror and heartbreak, but also the community's strength, the bonds reforged, and the newfound commitment to protecting the children and future generations. The story was a tribute to love, to perseverance, and most importantly, to the unyielding belief that justice, however delayed, could still be served. As she typed, Emma felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. The frantic energy that had driven her to chase leads and uncover secrets was giving way to a softer, more reflective calm. She knew this story would shake the town, disrupt old wounds, and challenge long-held beliefs, but it would also bring light where there had been only shadows. That night, as the stars twinkled above the still forest, Emma lay in bed beneath the soft quilt in the cabin's small bedroom. The silence outside was profound, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind through the pines and the distant call of an owl. Sleep came slowly, her mind still tangled in the day's work and the weight of all she had uncovered. But then, as she drifted into dreams, the past came alive in vivid color. She found herself back in the forest, under a canopy of ancient trees, bathed in dappled sunlight. There ahead of her, she saw 4 young girls, each distinct yet bound by an unbreakable connection. They were the Miller sisters, their laughter light and free, echoing through the woods like a song long silenced. Hand in hand they ran through the forest, their feet barely touching the mossy ground as they chased one another, spinning in circles beneath the towering trees. Emma watched in awe as they moved through the wildflowers and over fallen logs, their faces radiant with joy and innocence. The shadows that had once followed them seemed to dissolve into the sunlight, replaced by a warm, golden glow that enveloped the entire clearing. The girls' hands remained tightly clasped, a circle of unity and love that could not be broken by time or tragedy. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, streaming silently down her cheeks as she felt a profound sense of release and grace. In this dream, the sisters were not lost or broken. They were whole, free, and at peace. It was a vision that transcended the pain and horror she had faced, a reminder that even in the darkest stories, there was room for healing and light. Emma awoke to the quiet dawn, her heart still heavy, but somehow lighter. The soft gray light filtered through the curtains, casting gentle shadows across the room. She wiped her tears away and whispered a silent thanks to the forest, to the land that had guarded its secrets for so long, but had finally given her back something precious: faith. Faith in truth, faith in justice, faith in the unyielding power of compassion. She rose from the bed, stepping to the window to gaze out over the waking forest. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches swaying gently as the morning breeze whispered promises of new beginnings. Somewhere deep within those woods, the spirits of the lost were finally at rest, their stories told, their memories honored. Emma knew her work was far from over. The scars Wildwood carried would take time to fade, and not every secret had been unearthed. But she carried with her the knowledge that the light could break through even the deepest shadows, that courage and love could pierce the darkness. With renewed strength, Emma turned back to her desk, ready to finish the story that would carry Wildwood's truth beyond the forest and into the world, ensuring that the lessons learned, the lives lost, and the bonds rebuilt would never be forgotten. The forest. The girls, the families, all were forever intertwined in a circle of memory and hope, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who fight to bring light where there was once only darkness. And as Emma typed the final words, she felt a quiet certainty settle within her soul. This was not just an ending, but a beginning. A beginning of healing, connection, and a future shaped by the power of truth and the strength of the human heart. The first light of dawn spilled over Wildwood. A year later, the forest now bathed in a serene glow that seemed to pulse with life and promise. The trees stood taller, their branches heavy with vibrant green leaves, whispering softly in the cool morning breeze. Where once there had been shadows, now there were trails winding gently through newly protected groves, inviting families and children to explore without fear. Wildwood had transformed, no longer just a place haunted by its past, but a sanctuary where healing and hope took root. The town itself had changed too. The scars left by years of darkness were still visible beneath the surface. But the community had come together to rebuild trust and safety. New policies were in place to protect the children. Schools embraced programs teaching resilience, and neighbors watched over one another with renewed care. The mayor, no longer the man who had once cloaked the town in silence, now stood publicly committed to transparency and justice. His face bore the lines of humility and responsibility, the weight of past sins heavy, yet acknowledged. At the heart of the town, the Wildwood Sanctuary Memorial had become a gathering place for remembrance and reflection. Visitors came daily, some bearing flowers, others simply standing quietly, absorbing the palpable mix of sorrow and strength that hung in the air. The engraved names of the lost children glistened in the sunlight, a solemn reminder of the cost of silence and the power of remembrance. Emma stood among a gentle crowd gathered for the anniversary ceremony, a group made up of familiar faces, old and new. Parents held hands tightly with their children, some eyes wet with tears, while others shone with quiet pride. The town's musicians played a soft, haunting melody that drifted over the clearing, mingling with the rustling leaves and distant calls of birds that now felt like guardians of this healed land. Though the sadness lingered, etched deeply into the community's soul, it no longer held them captive. There was forgiveness here, fragile but real, a willingness to face the past together and to honor those who had been lost by protecting those still here. The memorial was not just a marker of grief, but a beacon of hope, a promise that the town would never forget and would never again let darkness take root. As the ceremony concluded, Emma's gaze wandered across the crowd, catching the eyes of children playing nearby, their laughter light and unburdened. She felt a bittersweet ache knowing the road they'd traveled to arrive here, the pain the secrets uncovered, the battles fought. And yet, there was something powerful in this moment, a testament to resilience, to the unyielding human spirit. When the crowd dispersed, Emma lingered a while longer, beneath the towering pines, their ancient branches reaching upward as if in silent prayer. The wind stirred the fallen leaves at her feet, whispering secrets she barely dared to hear. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the forest's quiet strength seep into her bones. She knew that some questions would remain unanswered, some shadows never fully banished. The echoes of the past would continue to ripple through Wildwood's soil, a reminder of the fragile balance between light and dark. But she also knew that the legacy she carried, the stories she had told, would serve as a shield for the generations to come. Emma gathered her belongings and walked slowly toward the edge of town. The familiar weight of memories, heavy but carried with grace. As she reached her car, she paused to glance back at the forest, its silhouette etched against the horizon. In that moment, she felt a quiet promise settle in her heart, a vow to honor the children's spirits and to carry their stories wherever she went. Her fingers brushed the small silver pendant she wore, a delicate circle, 5 points etched around the edges, a symbol she had come to understand as more than just a mark of the past. It was a symbol of unity, of protection, and of enduring hope. With one last look, Emma slipped behind the wheel and drove away from Wildwood. The trees receding in her rearview mirror, but never fading from her soul. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with new challenges and stories yet to be told. But for now, she carried with her the strength of a community healed and the quiet assurance that some wounds, though deep, could find peace. And somewhere deep within the forest, beneath the canopy of stars and whispering leaves, the spirits of the Miller sisters danced free, no longer shadows, but light guardians of a sanctuary reborn. Emma whispered a final goodbye, her voice soft and steady in the night air. I carry you with me, always. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy of Wildwood, casting dappled patches of light onto the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a quiet hush settling over the woods as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Emma stood at the edge of the clearing, the soft rustling of leaves and distant bird calls filling the silence around her. For a moment, the world seemed still fragile and full of promise. Her eyes scanned the shadows dancing between the trees, and faintly, almost imperceptibly, she thought she saw the fleeting silhouettes of children laughing, running, and chasing one another among the trunks. Their voices were light, a chorus of innocent joy that felt like a whisper carried on the wind. It was as if the forest had finally released the spirits it had held captive for so long. And those young souls now played freely beneath the golden sunlight, unburdened by pain or fear. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The sight was fleeting but unforgettable, a hauntingly beautiful reminder of the lives lost and of the hope that had finally taken root in this ancient woodland. The children's laughter seemed to echo not just in the forest, but deep within her heart, a balm for wounds that had long been raw and aching. She turned away from the clearing and walked slowly toward the outskirts of Wildwood, the town that had been both her battleground and her sanctuary. The path beneath her feet was soft with moss and fallen leaves, each step steady yet heavy with the weight of memory. Behind her, the forest stood tall and silent, a witness to the journey she had traveled from darkness to light, from silence to truth. As she reached the crest of a hill, Emma paused and looked back. The trees stretched endlessly in every direction, their leaves shimmering in the sunlight like a sea of emeralds. The town lay nestled beyond, small and peaceful, bathed in the warm glow of the morning. A gentle breeze stirred her hair, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. A faint smile touched her lips. Despite the scars and shadows, despite the lingering questions and unspoken secrets, there was hope. Wildwood was healing. The forest was healing. And she too was healing. Emma took a deep breath. Feeling the crisp air fill her lungs, cleansing her spirit, she knew that some stories never truly end, that some wounds never fully close. But she also knew that light could grow even in the darkest places, that truth once found was a seed from which new life could bloom. The forest had guarded its secrets for generations. But now those secrets had become a foundation for healing, a testament to the resilience of the human soul and the power of compassion. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows behind her, Emma felt the quiet strength of that truth settle within her. Her journey was far from over. There would always be mysteries, always be shadows. But today, at this moment, there was peace. There was hope. And sometimes that was enough. The screen fades to black. White text appears elegant and simple. Some secrets are meant to be buried. But sometimes the truth is the beginning of new life. The words linger heavy with meaning as the gentle sound of the forest, the whispering wind, the soft laughter of unseen children fills the silence. The story closes, but the journey continues.